You see that big Roman structure in the distance. You can go there, but you'll regret it. Because what's waiting for you up there is the most dark and disturbing cutscene all of Elden Ring has to offer. Get excited to meet the devil himself, Mohg, the Lord of Blood. On first glance, he is a stereotypical villain who leads this dark blood cult and kidnapped his half-brother, kindly Miquella. But as we unpeel the onion, the more complicated and tragic he becomes. In this video, I'm going to analyze Mohg's character from beginning to end and tell you the story of how the seducer got seduced. We are unknowingly introduced to Mohg's blood cult right out of the gate from this strange individual.
Oh yes, tarnished are we? Come to the lands between for the Elden Ring? Of course you have. No shame in it. Unfortunately for you, however, you are maidenless.
Varre tells you need to head to Stormvale and kill Godric to progress the story. And after you kill Godric, you can actually come back to this spot, and Varre has left this advertisement behind. Find yourself maidenless. Off to Liurnia with you then. Seek the Rose Church west of the gate town. The Rose Church in Liurnia does have this specific kind of rose called the Blood Rose. Blood slick roses that bloom in festering blood, particularly beloved by those who serve the Lord of Blood. Glory to his inevitable reign. This is the beginning of the motifs of this quest of love, lust, and seduction, and they will keep coming up. Varre then tests you, asking you what you think of the two fingers. And it doesn't take a genius to realize that, whatever they are, something is not right. And once he knows that we have a hint of doubt, he jumps on the opportunity to sow even more seeds of doubt with the two fingers. Varre is trying to seduce you to this new way of thinking, and this is when he really begins trying to entice you by giving you this festering bloody finger, which is a PvP game mechanic to invade other players, and I mean that does sound like a good time. We also find out more about Varre from the War Surgeon gown. Of the surgeons that were abducted by the Lord of Blood, none were able to tame the accursed blood. None but Varre, that is, though he was an exception. And from his white mask, blood-stained, faintly grinning mask, worn by war surgeons who were effectively mercy killers, the Lord of Blood's curse enlivens the wearer when bloodletting occurs. So Varre was abducted by Mohg and forced into the cult, but was the only one able to tame the accursed blood, so he's pretty high up in the ranks. However, Varre's mask that he wears is cursed so that when bloodletting occurs, he gets bloodlust. Mohg is abducting people into the cult and seducing them with bloodlust to get them to stick around. You may have also noticed that you can get invaded by these guys called the Bloody Fingers, for example, Okina. Okina's weapon, the famous Rivers of Blood, states, when Mohg, the Lord of Blood, first felt Okina's sword and madness upon his flesh, he had a proposal to offer Okina the life of a demon whose thirst would never go unsated. So Okina was a tarnish that attacked Mohg, but now we see a motif as Mohg as the devil. He essentially offered Okina a deal in which he can kill all the people he wants if he joins the cult, and Okina took it. So why did the writers give us this information about Mohg? What are we learning about his character? We are learning that he is actually quite strategic but also influential. A luminary is a person who influences others after all. He was attacked by this crazy tarnished but was able to convince him to join his cult instead. And Mohg recognizes that it's more beneficial to have a crazy person out there killing for you than to just kill them outright. When Mohg sees an opportunity to elevate his position, he's going to take it. He's actually better at playing the Game of Thrones than a lot of the other characters. But as we'll see, he didn't anticipate what he does to people being done to him. After you have done invasions for Varre, the last step of the initiation is to soak the Lord of Blood's favor with the blood of a maiden. So either kill an innocent woman or find one that is already dead. Varre keeps mentioning that we are maidenless to remind us that we're alone. It's another tactic to entice us to join the blood cult. Once we are done with the final initiation and have soaked the favor with the blood of a maiden, Varre gives us the pure blood knight's medal, which states, used to be granted audience with Mohg, only it is not yet time, for Mohg yet slumbers beside the divinity. Be patient, the new dynasty is nigh. Varre also mentions not to use the medal yet as well. Why is Mohg slumbering, and who is the divinity they are talking about? We'll find out soon enough. And I'm sure you all know this rule in video games: when an NPC tells you not to do something, you do it immediately. But this is about the time the regrets will start. You'll find yourself somewhere underground and greeted by these blood zombies. If you look closely, it seems like all their blood has been drained, and they have this weird blood growth that is also in the Rose Church. It's like they've been sacrificed for blood rituals, but since no one dies because Marika removed the rune of death, they still just flail about. And you will also encounter once again the Albinaurics, the group that Miquella was offering a refuge to in his Halig tree. It appears that, in a way, Mohg is offering them refuge here in the Mohgwyn dynasty as well. The Albinaurics are this artificial life form that are one of the oppressed groups under the Golden Order, along with the Misbegotten and the Omen. Being an Omen, Mohg is also in one of these oppressed groups himself. He, along with his twin brother Morgott, are demigod children of Queen Marika and Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. But they were both born cursed as an Omen, which is why they have these twisting horns. They were most likely born with the Omen curse because of Marika's genocide of the Horn-Sent people. She tried to hide the genocide and its leader, her other son Mesmer, in its own dimension in the Land of Shadow, and I dive more into that in this video. She tried to hide her Omen sons as well and banish them both to the sewers when they were born. Being born an Omen in Marika's society meant you were not in for a good time, as we learned from the Omen Baron. Omen babies have all their horns excised, causing most to perish. These fetishes are made to memorialize them. It's a pretty brutal lot in life, but since Mohg and Morgott were royalty, they didn't have their horns excised. They were just kept underground, unbeknownst to anyone, imprisoned for eternity. While Mohg was abandoned by his mother, he found another refuge in another absentee mother, the Formless Mother, which is an outer god. As we see from his signature incantation, Blood Boon, the Mother of Truth craves wounds. When Mohg stood before her deep underground, his accursed blood erupted with fire and besotted with the defilement that he was born into. Besotted is an interesting word used here. It means strongly infatuated. In Elden Ring, we see a lot of characters with self-hatred, and they are trying to be something they are not. For example, Mohg's brother Morgott pretends to be Margit. Morgott never fit the standards of the Golden Order since he is an Omen, but in spite of that, he loves and is loyal to the Order that will never love him back. Also, Mesmer is obsessed with snuffing out everyone who is stripped of the grace of gold. But he is the most base of all because he has the base serpent that he is hiding. And Mohg was abandoned and even imprisoned by his own mother, as we see from Mohg's shackle. His own mother rejects him and has forced him to live like this. This kind of treatment could definitely make someone fall into a sense of self-hatred, but he doesn't. Mohg is infatuated with the defilement he was born into. He loves that he is an Omen. He's not hiding who he is. It's possible that before he met the outer god, the Formless Mother, he did hate himself and was ashamed of what he looked like. And that the Formless Mother showing him love for the first time allowed him to actually begin loving himself. When you are treated so badly and have such a low sense of self-worth, it's easier for you to be manipulated by someone who would show you love and acceptance for the first time. But the Formless Mother's love is not unconditional. She craves wounds, and Mohg certainly gives it to her, as we see from the literal rivers of blood in his dynasty. But in exchange for the wounds, he also gets power. As we see in the boss fight, as he communes with the Formless Mother, his wings grow. So the Formless Mother is probably where he got this transactional view of relationships from. So far, Mohg has been categorized as this devil cult leader who abducts people but entices them with reasons to stay. Although his dynasty accepts all kinds of people, they all must pay a price. So in this cutscene, let's see how the devil tries to seduce us to join his dynasty.
Dearest Miquella, you must abide alone a while. Welcome, honored guest, to the birthplace of our dynasty.
And this is what he says when he kills us.
Miquella is mine and mine alone.
Did you catch that? He doesn't try to seduce us at all. And he should have, because we, the Tarnished, are the most powerful, craziest, probably the most bloodthirsty character in Elden Ring. At least that's what mine is like. But he is so besotted with Miquella that he thinks we are here to steal Miquella's corpse and attacks us. The seducer who makes people lose themselves with bloodlust got seduced and lost himself. It's like George R.R. Martin's version of Beauty and the Beast. The Beast is of course Mohg, who is shunned from society for being ugly. The Beast also makes a deal with Belle to hold her hostage instead of her father. And I suspect that Miquella and Mohg had some kind of a deal as well, but I will get to that a little later. The Beauty is Mohg's half-brother because, like I said, George R.R. Martin, but in this case, it's the Beast himself that gets Stockholm Syndrome, not the Beauty. And we learn from the Lord of Blood's exaltation about what his plans for Miquella were. Render up your offerings of blood to your lord, drench my consort's chamber, slake his cocoon's thirst, his awakening shall herald the dawn of our dynasty. For whatever reason, Mohg thinks that with enough sacrifices, the Formless Mother will be able to ascend Miquella to godhood and wake him up, so that he can be Miquella's consort to herald in his new dynasty. But it is odd that he thinks the cocoon is thirsty, like Miquella wanted all of these blood sacrifices to happen. Either way, Miquella's plan once again failed. He was ripped out of the Halig tree by the devil who kidnapped him and forced him into a relationship. Not great, but all of this is turned on its head when you enter the Land of Shadow and learn what Miquella was really doing. And as we all know by now, Miquella has the power to charm people. In the first part of the DLC, groups that would have been previously killing each other are now under his charm and are forced to get along. But when he breaks his great rune, the charm also breaks and they go right back to wanting to kill each other. We also meet the chillest dude in Elden Ring who happens to be one of Lord Mohg's pureblood knights. And with Ansbach, we begin to see another side of Mohg. Ansbach lets us know that Mohg was indeed charmed by Miquella and just how powerful Miquella is.
Kindly Miquella has discarded his great rune. The fog that vexed my aging faculties has been lifted, and follies better left forgotten haunt me once again. Once, In an attempt to free Lord Mohg from his enchantment, I challenged tender Miquella, only to have my own heart rather artfully stolen. I knew not how weak I was. I believed that with sufficient mastery, even an Empyrean would be within reach of my blade. I could not have been more mistaken. Miquella the Kind is a monster, pure and radiant. He wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
And doesn't this story sound a bit familiar? Ansbach challenged Miquella, and then Miquella stole his heart, and Ansbach wound up in the Shadow Realm conveniently away from Mohg. Kinda like when Okina challenged Mohg, and Mohg proposed he join the cult instead. While Mohg had to actually convince Okina, Miquella just used the magical charm on Ansbach. But I think this shows that Miquella learned a thing or two about strategy from Mohg, but now calls into question just how much Miquella is responsible for. Was Miquella using his charm to make the best out of a bad situation, or was none of it truly accidental? On one hand, Mohg has already been known to abduct people, so it kind of makes sense that he would abduct Miquella. But there are a few pieces of evidence that go against this. The first one being that Mohg thinks that with a massive blood sacrifice he can ascend Miquella to godhood with the Formless Mother. But I've looked at every item description related to blood and the Formless Mother, and there isn't one that suggests that she does something like this. If I missed it, let me know in the comments. Also, even if she could, I don't see why he would need Miquella for that. He could be the person that ascends to godhood from the Formless Mother. The other example we see with a character that has been affected by an outer god is Melania by the Rot God. And we know that if she blooms 3 times, she will become the goddess of rot. She doesn't need to do a massive sacrifice to do that. So where would Mohg have gotten this idea from? In my last video, I talked about the constant themes of mimicry in Nokron. There's the twins both named D, there is the mimic tier, there are the 2 gargoyles, and there are the piles of corpses stuck together similar to how they appear at the Gate of Divinity. And what is shining above the city of mimicry that can be viewed from almost anywhere? Mohgwyn Palace. Marika used all those corpses in the trailer to become a god. The people of Nokron tried to do the same to create a lord. And Mohg also tried to have a mass blood sacrifice to ascend Miquella to godhood. And I believe Miquella convinced him to do this because he was mimicking Marika. While it wasn't the final step on Miquella's path to godhood, it was the first step so that he could get into the Land of Shadow.
As if using Lord Mohg to gain entrance to the Land of Shadow were not enough, he plans to use his corpse as the vessel of his king consort. He has forsaken Lord Mohg's soul. He desires only his empty shell. It beggars belief, but I'm afraid tender Miquella fails to grasp the humiliation implied by this act. One thing is certain. My dear lord deserved better.
So Miquella wanted this massive blood sacrifice to happen to create a portal to the Land of Shadow. The most damning evidence is Miquella's butterflies. The butterflies are each associated with one of Marika and Radagon's children, and the Nascent Butterfly looks like it just emerged from its cocoon. So this one is Miquella. And for an item that is exceedingly rare to find, I sure do find these guys just about everywhere in the lands between. It's like I can't go 5 minutes without finding one and thinking about the guy, so I guess he did win after all. And you will find these butterflies in places that just seem unnatural for butterflies in general, like the sewers of Landell. Like, come on, why would butterflies be down here? In real life, they're usually outside in grassy areas, but down here, there's no sun, no grass, nothing for them to eat. The Nascent Butterflies are not down in these sewers to sell you on the atmosphere. They are here to show you that Miquella was down here. And Miquella probably didn't know where the Mohgwyn dynasty was, but he did know that the Omens were banished to the sewers. So he came down here after the Kayla disaster looking to make a deal. But you may have also noticed that there are no Nascent Butterflies in the Shadow Realm. Why is that when Miquella is the main character over there? My theory is that the Nascent Butterflies represent places he went when he was still in his eternal youth form, but by the time he went to the Shadow Realm, he had transformed into a young adult through the Halig Tree transformation. And there is one Nascent Butterfly in the Bloody Swamp in the Mohgwyn dynasty as well, so that means that Miquella was there at some point before he even embedded himself into the Halig Tree. And that was probably when Ansbach realized Mohg was charmed by Miquella and tried to challenge him, but ended up charmed himself. With his charm, Miquella was able to convince Mohg that with enough blood sacrifices to the Formless Mother, he would ascend to godhood, and in exchange, Mohg could become his lord consort. But Miquella seduced and betrayed him, just how Marika seduced and betrayed people to ascend to godhood herself. And I know I'm being hard on Miquella in this video, and I've been hard on him in other videos too. But I don't think he's completely evil, and I don't hate Miquella or anything. Quite the opposite, actually.
I think about this every day. I think about this all night long. I stay awake, not sleeping, because I'm thinking about this.
So you could consider me his biggest fan. I think he really wanted to create a better world and used his own advantages to try to do that. And I think Miquella planned to involve Mohg in his plans after the Caelid disaster. Because at that point, Miquella was alone. He was desperate and needed another ally. Someone that also wanted to see the Golden Order's downfall. Someone that was strong. And someone that could help him. But Miquella couldn't just ask Mohg for help, because Mohg doesn't offer anything for free. If he does anything for anyone, he needs to perceive that he is getting more out of it than the other person is. For Mohg to actually help someone else become a god, Miquella needed to offer him everything in return, including himself. There's no way Mohg would help someone become the next god if he also wasn't going to elevate himself to the highest position possible and needed to become Miquella's lord consort. And Miquella technically wasn't lying about that part, since he did use Mohg's body later on to be his consort. So he needed to magically charm Mohg, or else he might start asking too many questions about the details of the plan. He might also find out that Miquella was planning on betraying him, and I don't even want to think about what Mohg would do to someone who he thought was betraying him. Mohg's transactional nature helped him get through his childhood trauma and helped him build his dynasty, but it is also what ended up being his fatal flaw. And not saying it's right, but I understand why Miquella used Mohg and charmed him to get into the Shadow Realm, though I do think using his body for Radahn's soul was a bit much. Mohg's story is really a tragic one. And Ansbach lives with so much regret that he wasn't able to protect Mohg from Miquella.
Lord Mohg slain at his dynastic palace. It appears his body has been absconded with and taken straight to kind Miquella. Surely you recall that I once served Lord Mohg as a pureblood knight after failing him in every regard and losing sight of my vows. I'd do anything to make amends, in whatever meager way I can.
And as we learn from Ansbach's attire, the embroidered crest of the pureblood knights has now all but faded away. Ansbach understood that keeping his oath to his old master was not an act of logic, nor would it bear any justice, but it was for these very reasons he was unable to let go. Ansbach isn't trying to lure you to the dark side like Varre was. He is trying to do the right thing and what he thinks is honorable for his lord. And Ansbach's character represents this other side of Mohg. He was very loyal to the people around him, and I don't think people were always a means to an end for him. And the last thing Ansbach says to you really cements this other side of him.
I'm just astonished. Become our new lord. A lord not for gods, but for men.
Even though Mohg was the devil that seduced people into losing themselves, I think deep down there was a part of Mohg that wanted to create a world that was better than the one he was born into. But in the end, the devil was outsmarted and lost his own soul, a tale for the ages.